My name is Eleanor Briggs.
I am 74 years old. If you are watching this, thank you. Every like and every subscribe tells me that my story matters to someone out there. It pushes me to keep going. So if this speaks to you, please hit like and subscribe. It means more than you know. Now back to my story. I was lying in a hospital bed on the 9th day of my recovery when my daughter Diane walked in with her brother Curtis right behind her. They were not holding flowers. They were not holding my hand. They were holding folders. Diane set hers on the bed beside my leg like it was a desk. Curtis stood near the window with his arms crossed, looking like a man who had already decided everything. Diane said the words without any softness in her face. "The house has been sold." I did not understand right away. My brain was still slow from the stroke. I thought I had heard her wrong. I asked her to say it again. She did. 4 days ago, she said. The papers went through 4 days ago. I stared at the ceiling tiles above my bed and counted them. There were 12. I counted them because I needed something solid to hold on to while the floor fell out from under me. 9 days in the hospital. The house was gone before I could hold a fork properly again. Neither of them looked sorry. Neither of them asked if I needed water. They just stood there with their folders, waiting for me to accept it. I need you to understand what that house was. Harold and I bought it in 1983 with a $4,000 down payment saved over 6 years. 6 years of packed lunches and no vacations. The house had a front porch where Harold sat every evening with his coffee. It had a kitchen window that faced the oak tree we planted together the year Curtis was born. I put every rose bush in that front yard into the ground myself, one by one, over 15 springs. Harold died in that house in 2019. He died in the bedroom we had shared for 36 years. I held his hand until he stopped breathing and kept his watch on the nightstand after. One day before he died, Harold whispered something to me. His voice was so quiet I had to lean very close. He told me he had hidden something inside the wall of our bedroom closet.
Something important.
He said it was for me and only me. I never had the chance to go back for it. The house was sold while I was still learning to walk in a straight line. Whatever Harold left behind that wall was now sitting inside someone else's house, waiting in the dark behind a baseboard Harold had installed with his own 2 hands. Here is how they did it. Diane had held my power of attorney since 2 years before my stroke. I signed those papers during a small heart scare. My doctor suggested it as a precaution. Diane said it was just paperwork. Just in case, Mom.
I trusted her.
What I did not know was that Curtis had spent 3 years as a real estate paralegal. He knew exactly which boxes to check and which language to use. They listed my house the same morning I was admitted to the hospital. A cash buyer. Below market value. Closed in 4 days. My neighbor Ruth saw the for sale sign go up from her porch and called my cell immediately. I was too sedated to answer. The buyer paid $310,000 for a house worth $430,000. $120,000 disappeared into a gap my children had carefully measured in advance. They did not tell me. They did not ask me. They did not wait until I could speak in full sentences. Ruth kept calling my phone. I kept not answering. And across town, 2 people with folders were already planning how to divide money that was never theirs. The sign went up. The calls went unanswered. The papers were signed. The place they arranged for me was called Maplewood Gardens. The staff were kind, and I want to be fair about that. But the room was small and cold and smelled like cleaning products that never finished the job. One window. It faced a parking lot. Diane brought 2 suitcases when she dropped me off. She set them inside the door and said she would call soon. She did not hug me. She looked at the door handle when she said goodbye. I sat on the thin mattress and opened the first suitcase. My everyday clothes were there. Some shoes. A few books. But my jewelry box was not there. The photo albums I had kept on the living room shelf for 40 years were not there. Harold's watch was not there. I opened the second suitcase and checked every corner twice. Nothing. Diane had packed what she thought I needed and left behind every single thing that proved I had ever been a person worth remembering. I sat on that mattress with my hands folded in my lap. I did not cry. I thought about something Harold had said 4 years earlier at the kitchen table. He had used the careful voice he reserved for things that truly mattered. Harold opened a savings account in my name alone in 2018, 1 year before he died.
$47,000.
He handed me the card across the kitchen table and said, "Eleanor, if anything ever happens and you need to move without asking anyone's permission, this is your key." I had wanted to say nothing like that would happen. But Harold had known our children more clearly than I had allowed myself to. He did not say anything else. He pushed the card a little closer to my side. I kept it in the inside pocket of my winter coat for 4 years.
Not my wallet.
Not my purse. The coat. When Diane packed my things, she included the winter coat because March was still cold. I reached into that pocket while sitting on the maplewood mattress. The card was there. I held it with both hands. Then I picked up my phone and called my granddaughter Nora. She is 26 years old. She had visited the hospital every one of those 9 days. She brought soup in a thermos and sat beside the bed and talked about ordinary things. She answered on the first ring. I said, "Baby, I need you to come get me." She said, "I am already getting my keys." On the drive, Nora told me she had already been suspicious. 3 weeks before my stroke, she had been at Curtis's house for Sunday dinner. Walking to the bathroom, she passed his office. The door was not fully closed. Spread across the desk were property listing forms with my address printed clearly at the top. Something felt wrong enough that she stopped and photographed them on her phone before walking away. She had said nothing because she was not certain. Now she was. She handed me her phone at a red light. The listing agreement was dated 6 days before my stroke. Not after. Before. I looked at that date without blinking. I looked at it the way you look at something you already knew quietly in your bones, but could not say until the proof was sitting in your hands. My children had planned this before I ever got sick. The stroke had not given them the idea. It had only given them the opening they had already been preparing for. I handed Nora her phone and looked out the passenger window at the highway moving past. I said quietly, "I need a lawyer." She nodded and said, "I already called one this morning." The lawyer's name was Patricia Owens. Nora had found her the night before my discharge. Patricia had practiced elder law for 30 years. She had short gray hair and reading glasses she pushed up her nose when thinking. She did not waste words. We sat in her office and I told her everything.
The power of attorney.
The listing date on Nora's photograph. The cash sale at $120,000 below value. Maplewood Gardens and its parking lot window.
The missing jewelry box and Harold's watch.
She took 3 pages of notes and did not interrupt once. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she explained that the power of attorney I had signed covered healthcare decisions in a medical emergency. It was not an authorization to sell real property. Using it that way fell outside its legal scope. The sale might be voidable, she said, but reversing it was complicated because a cash buyer had already closed. She needed one more piece of information. She needed to know who had bought my house. I told her about Ruth and the familiar car she had recognized in the driveway during the walkthrough.
Patricia put her pen down slowly.
She looked at me over the top of her glasses. The buyer was Glenn Morrow, Curtis's brother-in-law. His wife's younger brother, who worked in property development and had been looking for a fast investment. He bought the house using a private loan Curtis had helped arrange.
Patricia pieced it together over 2 days. The plan was simple.
Glenn would hold the property for 18 months, then sell at full market value. The profit after repaying the loan would be divided between Glenn, Curtis, and Diane. They had used my house as a business deal. They had used my stroke as a window. They had used the power of attorney I signed in trust as a key to climb through it. Patricia used 2 words when she finished explaining: elder abuse. She said several states carried criminal penalties alongside civil damages for exactly this type of arrangement between family members and a connected buyer. Then she folded her hands on the desk and asked plainly how far I was willing to take it. I looked at my hands. I thought about the thin mattress. I thought about the nail hole where Harold's photo once hung. Then I said something I had never said aloud to anyone before in my 74 years.
He said, all the way.
Patricia looked at me for a moment. Patricia was mapping the legal paths when I stopped her. I told her there was something she did not yet know. She set her pen down and waited. I told her about Harold's last whisper, about the thing hidden inside the wall of our bedroom closet. I told her it was a waterproof envelope. Harold was a careful man his whole life. He sealed important things. He planned for situations he hoped would never happen. I told her that whatever he hid inside that wall, he had considered it important enough to conceal rather than file, which meant he did not trust it to survive in the open. Patricia asked what I thought was inside it. I told her what Harold had hinted at in his final weeks. He had grown uneasy about the questions Curtis and Diane kept asking. How much is the house worth? Is the mortgage paid off? What does the will say about the property? Harold had consulted his own attorney without telling either of them. He had written something, had it witnessed and notarized, then sealed it and hid it where only he knew to look. Patricia sat very straight in her chair. She said, Eleanor, if that document contains what I think it might, it changes the entire shape of this case. Harold wrote a handwritten addendum to his will in the final weeks of his life. His attorney had witnessed it. A notary had stamped it. Harold sealed it inside a waterproof envelope and placed it behind the loose baseboard at the back of our bedroom closet. A baseboard he had installed himself during a floor renovation 20 years earlier. He knew that wall better than any contractor. The addendum held one instruction that overrode everything else. The house was to pass to me without condition. Upon my death, it was not to go to Diane or Curtis. It was to go to Nora. Harold had watched his grandchildren grow up. He had made his decision quietly and written it down before anyone could argue with it. He had hidden it from the people he did not trust to honor it. I sat in Patricia's office and felt something open in my chest. Harold had known what they were capable of. He had done the only thing he could from a hospital bed of his own. He had left me a key inside a wall and trusted me to be strong enough to use it. That was Harold. Quiet, prepared, always 3 steps ahead of the trouble he hoped would never arrive. Patricia picked up her pen again. Before Patricia could file anything, my phone rang. A number I did not recognize.
He almost let it go.
but something made me answer. The voice was a man's, calm and a little uncertain. He said his name was Glenn Morrow. He said his contractor had been doing renovation work in the master bedroom and had removed a section of baseboard at the back of the closet to check the subfloor. Behind it, they found a sealed, waterproof envelope. He had not opened it. He looked up the prior owner through county records and found my number. He said it looked personal and he thought I should have it.
I sat very still. Patricia was washing my face.
I told Glenn not to open it and not to let anyone else near it. I asked if we could meet. He said yes without hesitating. Then he said something I had not expected. He said, "Mrs. Briggs, I want to be honest with you. I am starting to think I was not given the full picture about this property. There are things I think we need to talk about." I looked at Patricia across the desk. She raised her eyebrows slightly. I said to Glenn, "I believe you are right."
We set a time and a place.
We met at a coffee shop 3 days later. Glenn arrived before us and was already seated when Nora and I walked in. He was broad-shouldered and looked like someone who had not slept well in a week. The sealed envelope sat on the table in front of him, untouched. He pushed it across to me before saying anything else. I held it with both hands. Harold's handwriting was on the outside. Eleanor. Just my name. I set it down because I needed to hear Glenn first. He told us what Curtis had said to him, that I had agreed to the sale and wanted to downsize quickly, that the below market price was a family arrangement to help Curtis financially, that everything had been done with my knowledge and blessing. Glenn said he had trusted Curtis because Curtis was family and the paperwork had looked proper. But then Patricia's legal notice arrived and he began reading county records more carefully. Things did not line up. Then his contractor found the envelope. He put his phone on the table and showed us the text thread with Curtis. Every detail of the arrangement was written out between them in plain language. Glenn looked at me and said, "I was used too, Mrs. Briggs. I had no idea." Patricia opened the envelope the following morning with Glenn and Nora present. I sat closest to the desk. She broke the seal carefully along the top edge and unfolded the document inside with both hands. She read without speaking for 2 full minutes. Then she looked up and confirmed everything. The notarized addendum was valid, clearly dated, properly witnessed by 2 people whose signatures Patricia could verify through public records. It directed the house to me unconditionally during my lifetime and to Nora upon my death. Curtis and Diane were not mentioned anywhere in it. There was also a short personal letter folded beneath the legal pages. Patricia began reading it aloud and stopped because I raised my hand. She handed it across the desk without a word. I read it privately while the room stayed completely quiet. When I finished, I folded it and placed it inside my coat pocket against my chest. I have not read it aloud to anyone. Some things were written for one person only and belonged to that person alone. What I will tell you is that Harold had seen exactly what was coming. He had loved me well enough to prepare for it before he left. And he had loved Nora enough to protect her future before anyone could take it. Patricia filed on 3 fronts the same afternoon. The civil suit to void the property transaction based on unauthorized use of a limited power of attorney. The probate filing to enforce Harold's addendum through the estate record. And a formal complaint with the State Adult Protective Services Office, which triggered a parallel investigation. By 5 o'clock, Curtis had received a certified letter at his door. Diane had received a call from an APS investigator. Glenn's written statement had already been submitted. That evening I sat in the small apartment Nora had helped me rent 3 blocks from her own place. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen with a window facing a magnolia tree. I had Harold's watch on my wrist. Nora had gone to Diane's house with a list and a look that left no room for negotiation. She returned with 3 boxes. The jewelry box was inside. The photo albums were inside. Harold's watch was inside. I put it on immediately and did not take it off. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what Patricia had said before I left her office. She had said, "Eleanor, this is only the beginning." I had said, "I know." I said it clearly, without trembling and without hesitation. 2 days after the filings, Patricia received a discovery from the APS office she had not anticipated. The investigator had pulled all records related to my family going back 5 years. There had been a prior complaint, filed 3 years earlier by my former doctor, a careful woman named Dr. Anita Ford. She had noted during a routine checkup that I appeared withdrawn and had lost weight I could not explain. I had mentioned once, quietly, that my children were asking a great deal of questions about the property. Then I had changed the subject. Dr. Ford had flagged it. The complaint was investigated and closed because when the investigator followed up by phone, Diane had been sitting in the waiting room during my appointment. I told the investigator everything was fine. With Diane 6 feet away behind a door, I knew she was listening through. The closed complaint was now being formally reopened. There was something else. For 3 years, Diane had insisted on attending every single one of my medical appointments. She framed it as being a caring daughter. She called it, "just being there for you, Mom." It was not care. Patricia called me that evening and used a different word for it. She called it control. Diane called on a Thursday afternoon. I was at the Magnolia kitchen table with tea when my phone lit up.
Y let it ring 3 times.
Then I answered because I wanted to hear what version of herself she would bring to the call. She did not start with a question about how I was. She started at full volume. "Ungrateful," she said. "Embarrassing. After everything we sacrificed. You are tearing this family apart." I let her finish without a word. When she finally stopped, I said 3 sentences. "You sold my home while I lay in a hospital bed. You used a document I signed in trust. You left me in a room with a shared bathroom facing a parking lot." Then I said, "My lawyer will be in touch." And I hung up. Nora came to the doorway and asked if I was all right. I told her I was better than I had been in years, and I meant every word of it. There was a lightness in my chest I had not felt since before Harold got sick. The lightness that comes when you stop waiting for people to regret what they did and start taking care of yourself instead. Then I noticed something I had not thought about until that moment. Curtis had not called. Curtis came to Patricia's office 8 days after the filings. He did not bring a lawyer, which was the first sign something had shifted in him. He sat in the chair across from Patricia and me and looked smaller than I had seen him in years. He was 51 years old and he looked every bit of it that morning. He did not apologize. He offered a deal. He would support voiding the transaction, return his share of the proceeds, and sign a full written statement if Patricia agreed to limit the criminal referral scope. Patricia looked at me. I looked at Curtis for a long, quiet moment, long enough that he shifted in his chair. Then I asked him one question. I said, "Curtis, where are my photo albums?" He blinked. I said, "Where is your father's watch?" His mouth opened and nothing came out. I said, "Where is the ring your father gave me on our 25th anniversary?" The ring that was not in my jewelry box when Nora collected it. Curtis looked at the desk. He said, "That was Diane." I said, "I know whose hand I saw it on at the hospital. The day you told me my home was gone." I said, until every single item is returned to me, we have nothing to discuss. Nora drove to Diane's house the next morning. She stood at the front door and used the calm, flat voice she saves for situations already decided. She said, I need Grandma's photo albums, her jewelry box with every item that belongs inside it, and Grandpa's watch. Today. Diane tried to push back. Nora said the investigator would be asking about those items, and Diane could explain their location in a formal interview if she preferred. Diane's face moved through several expressions. 30 minutes later, 3 boxes were loaded into Nora's car. That evening, I opened the jewelry box at the kitchen table. Harold's anniversary necklace. The bracelet from our first year. The earrings I wore to every important occasion for 4 decades. All present, except one thing. The anniversary ring was missing. I had seen it on Diane's hand at the hospital the morning she told me the house was sold. She had been wearing my ring while delivering that news. I looked at the empty velvet space for a moment. Then I called Patricia. She made one call to the detective already assigned to our case. Within 6 days, the ring was recovered and returned. When the officer placed it in my hand, I put it on immediately. It fit the same as it always had. The story leaked on a Wednesday. Patricia had filed through the county courthouse, and the documents became public record immediately by law. A journalist covering elder abuse cases found the filing by Thursday morning. By afternoon, a story was running online with a headline naming the arrangement plainly. By Friday, it had spread to 2 regional outlets and circulated widely through neighborhood social media. Diane and Curtis's names were in the public record. Their employers saw it. Their neighbors saw it. People at the church I had attended for 38 years saw it.
De Pastor Called me fraída evening.
He did not call Diane. He called me. He asked how I was doing and whether I needed anything. I thanked him and said I was managing. It was a small thing. But after months of feeling erased from my own life, being the first call someone made felt like stepping back into a room I had been locked out of. I did not seek the press coverage.
Y gave no interviews.
But the coverage did something Patricia had not planned for. It brought 2 of my neighbors forward with observations they had been holding for over a year. Ruth, who had watched from next door with quiet, steady eyes. Ruth had been keeping notes for 2 years. A small notebook with entries marking each time Diane's car sat outside my house for long stretches. Dates I came out afterward looking hollowed out. Dates a locksmith arrived when I was not home. 26 months of careful documentation from a woman who watched and said nothing because she was not sure it was her place. Joseph had something different. He had kept a log on his phone because he noticed patterns. And he had one specific entry that Patricia read twice. 9 months before my stroke, Joseph had been at his mailbox when he heard me on my front porch on the phone. I had not known he was nearby. He heard me say, "They keep asking me to sign things and I do not know what to do." He wrote it down that same hour with the date and time. He had kept it without knowing why. He knew why now. Patricia added both of them to the witness list within 24 hours. Ruth's notebook established the pattern across 2 years. Joseph's note placed it at the exact right moment. Together they turned what might have appeared to be a family disagreement into what it actually was. The night before the civil hearing, I sat alone in the Magnolia kitchen. Nora had offered to stay, but I told her I needed the quiet. I made tea and sat with Harold's letter.
The one from inside the wall.
I had read it 5 times since Patricia opened the envelope. That night I read it once more. Harold had written it knowing time was short. His print was careful and steady, the way he wrote only for things that truly mattered. He said he was sorry he could not stop what he feared was coming. He said he had tried to leave me everything I would need. He said to trust Nora and to trust myself. Then he wrote one final line. He said, "Eleanor, you have been the strongest person in this house for 41 years. You simply forgot to show them." I folded the letter and placed it in my coat pocket. I washed my cup and wound Harold's watch and laid out my clothes for morning. Then I went to bed without rehearsing a single word. I did not run through my testimony or plan what I would say on the stand. I slept the full night through in the quiet apartment with the magnolia tree outside, in a bed I had chosen myself. The hearing lasted one full day. Glenn testified first. He spoke clearly and without hesitation, describing every conversation with Curtis and every detail of the arrangement. He did not minimize his own part in it. He said he had been careless and had trusted the wrong person and was sorry for it. Joseph testified next. His phone log was entered into evidence. Ruth's notebook was submitted as a physical exhibit. The APS investigator presented her findings. Patricia read Curtis's text messages aloud from subpoenaed records.
Diane sat in the gallery and cried twice.
Curtis stared at the table and did not look up from it once.
He testified last.
I sat in the chair and answered every question clearly, in complete sentences, without rushing. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice or perform any emotion for anyone in the room. I told the truth the way Harold had taught me, without decoration, without apology, just the facts laid out in order like stones across a stream. The judge was a woman in her mid-60s with reading glasses and a face that gave nothing away throughout the day. She listened to everything. When I finished, she wrote something on her notepad. She called a short recess. The room was very still while we waited. The judge voided the transaction.
The house reverted to my name.
Glenn would be made financially whole from the proceeds Curtis and Diane had received, plus interest calculated from the date of sale. Harold's probate addendum was upheld and formally entered into the estate record. Nora was named my successor beneficiary on the property, exactly as Harold had written and intended. Curtis and Diane were ordered to pay my full legal fees, all damages for emotional distress, and the full cost of every day I had spent at Maplewood Gardens. The criminal referral for elder financial abuse was forwarded to the district attorney. Patricia made sure I understood what that meant before we left the building. It meant the matter now belonged to people with subpoena power and no reason to be gentle. I said, "Good." We walked out into the afternoon light, Nora on one side and Patricia on the other. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A journalist's name and number on the screen. I looked at Patricia. She said, "That is entirely your decision." I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment. I thought about the parking lot window at Maplewood Gardens. I thought about Harold's letter folded against my chest. I moved back into my house on a Saturday morning in April. Nora carried the boxes. Ruth brought a pot of soup and set it on the stove without being asked. Joseph carried the heavier items from the car with the careful efficiency of a man who measures everything twice. Glenn arrived at 10 with the house key and a handwritten note. It said, "This was always yours. I am sorry it took this path to come back to you. I am sorry I was part of what happened, even unknowingly." He had signed his full name. I read it at the kitchen door and put it in the drawer where I keep things worth keeping. Glenn shook Nora's hand and mine, and then left without making it a longer moment than it needed to be. After everyone settled inside, I walked through every room alone. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter where Harold and I had eaten breakfast for 36 years. I stood in the bedroom doorway. I looked at the closet where the baseboard had been replaced and the wall was solid again. Then I walked to the front window and looked out at the rose bushes in the yard. All 15 of them.
Still standing.
Still putting out new growth even after the long winter.
My name is Eleanor Briggs.
I am 74 years old. I am standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning with the oak tree visible through the window above the sink. Harold's watch is on my wrist. The anniversary ring is on my finger. His letter is in my coat pocket where it will stay as long as I have a coat to put it in. Curtis and Diane are facing proceedings that no longer belong to me or Patricia. That part of the story belongs to the district attorney now. What I will tell you is that I did not lie in that hospital bed plotting anyone's downfall. I simply stopped accepting what had been done to me as something I had to absorb quietly and move past. I stopped being the version of myself that made it easy for people to take. Harold had seen that version of me for 41 years and loved her completely. But he had also seen what was coming and hidden a letter in a wall because he knew I would need it. He was right. If you are someone whose family has mistaken your patience for permission, I want you to hear this clearly. Your quiet is not agreement. Your kindness is not a contract.